Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on OurScoop.com. You already know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Scoop, the weekly podcast of OurScoop.com, the authority on Temple Athletics. I'm your host, John DiCarlo. We've got assistant editor Kyle Gauss with us. We're going to have kind of a fragmented appearance here from OurScoop reporter Ryan Mack, who specifically wanted to be on just so he could see his buddy Kyle here. He's going to be on for the intro, popping out for a Philadelphia Inquirer intern meeting, and then maybe going to try to pop on after that. So
it's a bullpen day.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are just like, you legitimately wanted to be here so you could see Kyle, and you guys were just chatting it up, and just, you want to tell everybody about the 7-game, I'd never heard this before, like a week is a 7-game series.
Yeah, you know, Kyle and I were talking about it because I said I want to get 1% better every day and everything like that. But also, my big phrase now is every week is a 7-game series. And you just need to win 4 days. You just need to win 4 days. That's okay.
Kyle, what were you used to saying now? Like Mondays and Tuesdays?
Monday and Tuesdays are probably going to be losses. I mean, obviously there's outliers, right? Like a lot of times you go on hot streaks and maybe it's vacation and you win 7 in a row. But most weeks are, it's like there's a West Coast trip out there, and the best you can really expect is to win 4 of 7. So like you lose Monday, Tuesday, you got to split Wednesday, Thursday. You can't get swept. And then you got to take care of business at home and sweep the weekend.
I like that. It's good. Good forecast for a good show. Great show coming up. We're going to have our recap of Saturday's Cherry and White spring football game. A lot of reporting out there already. If you're an OurScoop.com subscriber, of course, you got the post-game interviews, game recap, a lot of stuff out there on the message board. So we'll talk more about the Cherry and White game. You're going to hear a little bit later. Part of Temple football general manager Clayton Barnes' interview. Talk with reporters today. We've got more men's basketball developments with the staff. Kyle broke the story about the newest addition to the staff. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit more, as promised, about the women's transfer portal additions, and then we've got stuff to get to in the mailbag as well. The Scoop, as it always is brought to you by Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. If you've been injured while on the road or the highway and the crash was someone else's fault, the insurance company is not going to be on your side. You need us, Temple law grads, who will fight hard to get the compensation that you deserve. We only get paid if we win, so in Pennsylvania or New York, call us today at 215-261-7359. That's 215-261-7359. And you can find them on the web at greenspans-law.com. We will remind you again that it's a great time to take advantage of the subscription deal that On3 and OurScoop are running. 50% off on a spring sale during the duration of the portal opening, and you get a free year of The Athletic. We broke a story about men's basketball portal visit, so that's some of the stuff that you get being an OurScoop subscriber, along with the terrific series that Varun Kumar is doing on the 2001 Elite 8 team. We got one more installment of that series coming out, so again, if you're an OurScoop subscriber, you can get access to all that as well. So how are you guys doing otherwise, other than coming up with these, or I guess reciting these slogans about the week being a 7-game series? You guys have any other affirmations for each other before we dive into spring game stuff here? Are you good?
No, I don't think I have any. Kyle, do you have any?
Mine would fall on deaf ears if this weekend's any indication.
Oh.
Whenever I give you affirmations, you don't take them to heart.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I let you down.
What did he say to you? You're seen and you're heard, and then you didn't respond.
Yeah, it was because it was literally
And it turns out at the end that Kyle was not seen or heard.
Sure
Am
was.
I right?
Because I'm so sorry. Yeah, it had happened, and then something had happened immediately as soon as you had text that. So I just stopped texting, and so I'm sorry.
To be clear, it started because Ryan texted me at 10:34 at night, just saying, "I just want to let you know I care."
Just to me.
Kyle.
I was replying to one of your text messages.
10 hours later.
You are a late texter.
Yeah. I'm a night owl. I've kind of learned that a little bit about myself.
Just in your little nest, just flapping your feathers. I'm a night owl. Who can I reach out to? Ooh, it's 2:30. Ooh. I got a giggle out of Kyle. That's a win.
Oh, because I'm very hard to I'm very stoic. I'm very hard to get a reaction.
Sometimes you are a tough judge, and that's fine. I know you're not gonna like fake laughs with me, but I don't know. Let's a little giggle. I'll take it. I'll take it. Let's get into what we saw this past Saturday at the Cherry and White game at Showed Off Field. The offense scored 6 times on Saturday. Generally a positive sign for them, considering that the defense had really kind of dominated things in the last few scrimmages. Jaxon Smolik had comparing it to the other scrimmages, had what was really clearly his best day of the spring. He went 15 of 19 passing for 241 yards on a day where the pressure was kind of consistently there from the defensive line. Johnny Shepard, on the other hand, did not have a good day. He was 6 of 21 passing for just 70 yards. He did have 2 drop passes, but that would still put him at 8 of 21 if he can complete those other ones. And it was just kind of like a tick off on most of his throws. The arm strength is there, but just sometimes the timing wasn't. And with Colin Chase, Peter Clark, Reese Stocksdale all out, and Amir Hardy was also out too with a concussion. He took a tough hit a couple weeks ago in practice. So all those guys were held out of the game. It was a day for some of the younger receivers and new faces to shine a bit. DeMonte Green, the D2 transfer, had 4 catches for 40 yards. Xander Baptiste had a nice game, 3 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Cohen Logan had 2 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. The tight ends had 6 catches for 39 yards without Peter Clark on the field. Joey Schlaffer had a late touchdown catch from Brody Norman on the last play of the game. That the staff stopped the game clock so they could finish off that series. So technically they wouldn't have had enough time to get that drive going. But so Brody Norman was the last quarterback to see the field and drove the team down there. Defensively, Colin Dinkins, that Viper safety, the Penn State transfer, had a really nice day. We talked to him after the game. Amari Womack on our staff has a story up now that you can see on the site. So Colin Dinkins, Reggie Jones, Jude Okoleke, and Joseph Ozane all had sacks. Josh Dengite, the mid-year freshman enrollee at linebacker, looked pretty good. He had 5 tackles. Jalen Joseph had 4 tackles. Casey Keeler, after the game, just said, like, as he was walking away from he was in a good mood. He was talking about how his wife made him wear a hat and all this stuff. But he at the end, he's like, anything else you guys want to talk about? Literally, like, Rich was like, last couple of questions, and classic KC, he's like, I'm here, So, but he said, we just want to make sure that I get out there. Number 10 was hard to block all spring. So, Javon Brown, Curly Ordonez didn't play at linebacker. Curly, I think we've mentioned before, was out all spring after having surgery. He'll be back in August. We got a lot of mailbag questions this week, and I thought we'd kind of mix them in throughout the show. And we'll start off with a couple here from Stapler01. He's one of our subscribers. This is on the football board. First question here, now that we've gotten through spring ball, again, this helps us set the agenda because this is stuff we would have been talking about. The first question from Stapler01, now that we've gotten through spring ball, which position group looks the strongest? Which is the biggest question mark? Ryan, let's get something out of you before you hop on. Do you have time to answer this before you hop on your meeting?
Yeah, I can run through this one real quick. Yeah. So position group for me would look the strongest. For me, it would be the running backs and wide receivers. And that's mostly just because of their depth. We talked about the wide receivers, how Colin didn't play, Reese Stocksdale didn't play, even though he's a tight end, Peter Clark didn't play. But we saw that Jaxon Smolik was able to find out different receivers. JoJo, who had been in and out during spring ball, came in.
He caught a long touchdown.
He caught a long touchdown pass. Jace Freeman had looked good all spring. DeMonte Green has looked good the last couple of scrimmages, especially on Saturday. I know there's only so much you can say there, like for a spring game, but they've shown that there's a lot of just like deep and there's just talent, especially when you come in like Cohen Logan, like a freshman coming in. They have some good no Casey said that they all need birthdays, but that group looks good. Same thing with the running backs. Sam Brown looks good, Hunter Smith looks good, and Kevion Mason, they all made big plays. DeCarlos Young had a couple of good runs on Saturday, so that's a group that I like. There's a lot of positives from. And then from just like the biggest question mark for me, it's the offensive line. We've seen a lot, especially when it comes to pass protection. Jaxon Smolik and Johnny Shepard just looked under pressure. We saw it the spring game. We also saw it a lot during spring ball and spring camp as a whole, where they were a lot of times they had to roll out of the pocket or they were just quickly sacked. There was a play called dead because someone just broke the line immediately. They had trouble picking up blitzes. So that's been one of my biggest like question marks of this year.
Ryan, we'll see it in a little bit. Big time guy running off to his Philadelphia Inquirer meeting. Kyle, what about you? Getting through spring ball, position of strength for this team, and then what's a question mark for you?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to say anything revolutionary here. I will say I think it's an encouraging sign that with only a half of Colin Chase and JoJo Bermudez being banged up, that the wide receivers were still able to be productive. I think Xander Baptiste is really interesting. He's a Canadian that played in Asheville for Sean Bryson, who I forgot was a graduate assistant under Rules First Staff.
Oh yeah.
I literally had blanked that out of my mind. But big guy, 6'4". He actually was playing corner last year until they swapped him. So him to have a big day is an encouraging sign for, even if it's not this year, but maybe just like down the line, that's an encouraging sign. But conversely, this is the hard part of spring ball, right? Is you never know, like, is one position group really good or is the other group struggling? Like, it can be like a yin and a yang because you're covering the same team. I think cornerback's still just a position of not necessarily even concern, but just like something to observe. If I had to, and I know, a little inside baseball, this podcast is being recorded prior to the Clayton Barnes presser.
Right.
So maybe that gets brought up today. I think if there's one position, like, you think, okay, maybe are they still in the market for somebody? Is there somebody out there that's a fifth-year corner or somebody like that can come in and maybe provide a veteran presence? Or are they going to go out there with just the JUCO transfers and their redshirt freshmen and redshirt sophomores? I truly don't know.
Same thing for me for the corners, just because, Casey was asked about them on Saturday. And we'll be, as Kyle said, we're just leaving a spot in the pod here for part of the Clayton Barnes interview. And again, we always look forward to talking to Clayton because he's never afraid to just kind of go really like up and down the roster and kind of assess where they are and where they need to be. JoJo Bermudez is typically pretty like quiet and soft spoken, although I just asked him, who's looked good to you? And he brought up Devontae Ward Grant. Right. And I said, what made you bring him up? And JoJo Bermudez said, he's patient. I'm a fast, quick receiver, and I get off on a lot of people, but he gives me a run for my money every time I go against him. So they have bodies in that room. I feel like they feel that they've improved. But then when Casey was asked about the corners, he kind of gave like this, I don't know if lukewarm is the right, I don't want to take things out of context, but this is what Casey Keeler said. I'll read you the quote. Talk to Henry Baker. I think still it's like he likes the ability in the room. It's just we got to keep on stacking days. So I don't really know where we would put in terms of who's where yet. I think that is one of the positions where it's still a little bit of a mystery, and we probably have 4 that are really competing for those jobs. But I would say that's the one position where it's probably a little bit more of a mystery than anything else. I'm okay at the talent level there. It's just no one has really said, my position, I'm taking it. So it's not a glowing endorsement of the room. It might just turn out to be like it's a mid-April endorsement of the room, right. I would say. But they're not talking about them as definitively as he is. It's like, for example, like Jaxon Smolik, we'll talk about him. He said, I think he has elite arm talent. You and I were kind of talking about this just yesterday, just over the phone. I think that Johnny Shepard might have the stronger arm, but Jaxon put some really nice touch on some of his throws. And that would be, for me, I think if I were to answer this question, to get back to Stapler One's question here, like, I think I'm encouraged by a number of positions. I think they're deep at wide receiver. I think they're deep at running back. For me, it would either like what position, what's the biggest question mark? I would say the corners are with Ryan, maybe the offensive line, but that goes to the point that you were making. And I think we talked about this last week. It's like, is it just good on good, and that the offensive line maybe has made strides and that they're just facing better pass rushers this season? Maybe so. We really won't truly know until maybe we start getting more detailed answers on this in August. Of course, they'll scrimmage again, but they were rolling out a lot and they were under pressure a lot. Like the throw to Cohen Logan was a nice one from Jaxon Smolik to Cohen Logan. Nice sign for Cohen Logan, who, again, we say this about all these mid-year freshmen. They would normally be in high school right now, but they were under some pressure. So, but overall, I think if you're that staff, knowing that, as we've said before, they're not really running they're not fully opening the playbook, I think, on either end. But I think you wanted to see the offense have a good day, considering some of the progress that the defense made. The second part of Stapler 01's question, based on what you saw during the spring, do any of Cam Boykin, Brody Norman, or Brady Palmer have a shot at playing this season? That's a quarterback. Short answer is you don't, and it's no knock on these guys, you don't want Cam Boykin, Brody Norman, or Brady Palmer playing this season. Right. If they are, it means one of two things: that either Jaxon Smolik or Johnny Shepard has been just not playing well, or that one of them got hurt. I would say that they haven't, I don't know, maybe Clayton will talk about this later today. Maybe they will release an official post-spring depth chart. You could tell me that either Brody Norman or, oh, sorry, excuse me, Brady Palmer or Cam Boykin might be your three. Cam Boykin got a set of snaps and actually looked like he threw the ball with some zip. You're, of course, mindful of like what offensive line they're playing behind, which skill position guys they're playing with. But Cam Boykin actually looked pretty sharp. Brady Palmer, I think, had a pretty nice spring. They traditionally, well, not traditionally, they had typically been putting Brady Palmer in scrimmage situations before they were putting Brody Norman in. But Brody Norman had the last shot at that one drive, moved him down the field. He can really run. He's really, really quick. He's got a little bit more of like this three-quarter delivery, but all these guys, well, Brody and Brady would still be in high school, but you don't want to see these guys play this year unless if you're a Temple fan and you want good things to happen. The only way you want to see them playing is if they're playing in a blowout. Same thing for Lamar Best, who gets here in August.
Right. Yeah, I'll just say I know true freshmen playing quarterback in college in Division I college football is rare. I know that people are going to point towards EJ Warner and PJ Walker.
Yeah.
I will just caution that those two guys went 2-10 and 3-9 in their years. So like even though they had good individual years, those teams were in different positions than what Casey Keeler and his staff probably expects this team to be in this year. I think if you told me right now on April 15th that they were going to start Lamar Best and go 3-9, I don't think anybody in Temple football's in EO right now would be accepting of that record. I think the expectation is to compete for a bowl game, and I don't think a true freshman probably helps you in that regard.
Yeah, and those guys struggled as two freshmen. They also weren't playing against and throwing into like secondaries now that have 24 and 25-year-old guys and 23-year-old defensive tackles, 22, 23-year-old. Again, these are guys that are fourth, fifth, sixth-year seniors, like really going up against grown men. On one hand, in college, it gives you an advantage. Of course, if you're an NFL draft fan, some of those guys now it's a little bit of a slight detriment to them in the draft. But yeah, I just don't think you want that.
It's never stopped the Eagles. They'll draft 26, 27-year-old offensive linemen. They don't care.
Yeah, and I was going to say famously, not famously.
Infamously.
Yeah, the people, because everybody just wanted to know our draft takes. I remember saying to you, like, I like this pick, and you're like, I don't. And,
I was probably biased. I really liked Jaquan Jarrett to the Eagles, and that didn't work out.
Yeah, well, we've talked about this before, and Eagles fans know this. I love Jaquan. I think just picking him in the second round and not in the fourth or fifth, and then Andy Reid saying he reminds me a little bit of Brian Dawkins. I mean, you're just putting him in a box by drafting him in the second round, and then also comparing him to Doc, just not good. But hey, went on to the Jets. I think he's still on the Panther staff right down in Carolina.
He won an AFC Player of the Week one year with the Jets.
Yeah, because didn't he have 3 sacks? Or he had 3
I think he had like 2 picks and 2 sacks or something.
Yeah,
the same
great game.
Yeah.
He would have been a really nice rotational safety, which is what he turned out to be. But when they picked him in the second round, I was like, wow. Other impressions of the day. Again, I think going back to obviously the quarterbacks. I mean, Kyle has been saying, I think in the last few episodes, and he's right, it does not behoove Casey Keeler to say, I'm going to name a starter now. Like he could have walked into the post-spring game press conference on Saturday and said, hey, yeah, Jaxon Smolik looked great. If you're a betting person, yeah, Jaxon Smolik's probably going to start. He just looked clearly like the better quarterback. That's not to say, and I don't think this is lip service, there have been some good practices for a Johnny Shepherd, but I think he misfired on his first 8 attempts, was it? Yeah, I mean, he just didn't have a good day. But as Kyle has been saying, it really doesn't behoove Casey Keeler to say Jackson's our starter. You want to keep the heat on him. I think Jaxon Smolik knows that he had a really good day. I asked him why do you think that is. He's like, just reps. I got 500 reps. I mean, both of these guys are getting more reps than they ever have before. When you watch a Johnny Shepherd play, there were a couple of throws that on a couple of in-breaking routes where I think if he had gotten rid of the ball earlier, there were a couple of plays that Amari would spot and be like, man, if he had just gotten rid of the ball there, he would have hit it. So I think it's Jaxon Smolik's job to lose. But if people are wondering, in case you missed it, did Casey Keeler name a starter after the spring game? No, but I think we'd all be surprised if Jaxon Smolik doesn't win the job. But Kyle, just kind of emptying the notebook on this. Anything else that you wanted to touch on in the spring game? I don't expect him to be maybe at the top of the running back rotation, but it was kind of nice to see DeCarlos Young ran pretty well. He kind of ran like he was like ticked off. His hamstring looked healthier. He actually ran the ball pretty well. But any other guys stand out to you from Saturday?
Yeah, I think Ryan talked about that running back group in general. I think is all of a sudden pretty deep. I think Sam Brown so far has kind of exceeded even maybe their most optimistic of expectations with the way that he runs and with his healthiness. And then I still think they're incredibly high on Kevion Mason and R.J. Blunt. I know when I talked to somebody in the middle of the season last year, the expectation they were like it's going to be Kevion and R.J. Blunt next year are like 1-2. Sam Brown might have left them, and all of a sudden maybe R.J. Blunt becomes a guy that redshirts or plays more sporadically than he might have thought because Hunter Smith also comes back, and now you have 3 like relatively proven running backs. I think this is going to be a very telling season as far as how Tyler Walker, I think we can get this in the mailbag, how Tyler Walker actually runs his offense. Because I think now, for as good as Evan Simon was at things, for as good as Jay Ducker was at things, I don't think they had the depth at running back that they really would have wanted. I don't think they had the mobility at quarterback that they would have wanted. And I think they have both of those now, so I'll be very curious just what a Tyler Walker offense truly looks like.
Yeah, agreed. Again, but we'll still be talking a little bit more about spring ball and, of course, football in the coming weeks. Again, if you're an Owl Scoop subscriber, you can go to the site, check out our coverage there. You can check out Don Otto's photo gallery. So, and we'll have coverage of Clayton Barnes's press conference. Speaking of that, we're going to leave a spot in here from a couple of Clayton's responses from today. As Kyle said, a little inside baseball. We are recording this before Clayton speaks to reporters, but we want to get some of his insight into the pod. Always a great conversation with him. He's pretty forthright about how they approach revenue share, contracts, how they've maintained things on the roster. And again, he and his scouting staff, you'd have to say, have done a pretty good job to this point in building this roster, both getting some P4 transfers, D2 transfers, FCS transfers. So here's a little bit of Clayton Barnes' conversation with reporters on Wednesday. And then when we come out of this, we'll start talking some men's and women's basketball portal news. When it's all inter-squad stuff, the offensive line looked like it was giving up a lot of pressure on Saturday, and there were other times during scrimmages where it looked like that. And it's a question of, are they just fine and the defensive line's getting better, or are there things that need to be tightened up on the offensive line? And I wanted to get your take on that too.
Yeah, I think, having 4 returning starters that have played in our conference and we know what they're capable of, especially some guys that are younger that are continuing to grow and develop, baseline what you have there. Those guys are obviously continuing to get better, and as far as the offseason getting bigger, faster, stronger, that stuff always matters. And continue to develop under Coach Johnson. So those guys still have room to grow. You at least have a baseline understanding what you have to work with. With those 4 and Luke Watson, who, came out of spring, probably a bit more solidified, the right tackle spot. He's still going to be a competition, but he really emerged as being probably the best option after 15 practices at that spot. And he's also got playing experience. So like I said, you have a baseline understanding what you have with those 5 guys. With the depth that we added, those guys are continuing to get better because they've been pushed with the guys that are behind them. So when you say, okay, we feel like we have a decent idea we have O-line, and then you see how the defense line performs against them, well, that's a pretty good indicator that we might have some success up front on defense, right? And I think one of the biggest things is just the depth and the number of guys who can roll in there. Like, if you look at just like the D-line, if you take out the rushes, look at ends, noses, and tackles, like we have a legit 3 deep at all 3 of those spots. And you don't really see much drop-off between 1s, 2s, or 3s who's in there. Like, those guys can rotate, drive to drive, and you don't really notice if it's the 1s, 2s, or 3s. So I think the strength in numbers is a big part of that. Like, we're not going to have guys that go out there and play 70 snaps a game because when you have fresh legs on the field, that's just going to make an impact against an offensive line that has to take every snap most of the time. So that should be an advantage for us going into the fall, is I feel like we have a lot of guys we can rotate in there against the offensive line. So definitely promising with the D-line. They're definitely parts of the spring ball where you saw the offensive line, you really get some good movement and go open up creases in the run game. But, probably more often than that, you saw the defensive line being really disruptive. I think our defense tackles inside in particular have been really difficult to block. That's really disrupted the interior run games. Now the offense is to get on the perimeter. I think in pass protection, that's when the rushes have really made an impact. With Jaylon and Jameer, like those 2 guys have really been dynamic. And the other thing is, like, when you bring in guys like that are true rush type outside linebackers, they're more of a scheme fit than we had last year. Now you can do more things up front with 7 pressures and dropping those guys out and doing line stunts and that kind of stuff, just because you have more versatile players that can kind of stand up, play off ball, and that kind of thing. So I think, the offensive line is a mixture of, they had really good edge rushers they were going against, but also we were able to throw lots of different blitz looks at them as well, just because we're much more versatile up front. So I think it's really been an iron sharpens iron mentality with both sides. Like both sides have played really physical. And so that's a chance for those guys to continue to get better going into the fall. They feel like they've faced good competition that's going to be adequate to above average to really good at our level.
All right, let's talk about what is going on with the men's and women's basketball team as the NCAA's transfer portal window continues to be open. We were the first to report the news of Dallas Dillard, former D2 All-American, visiting Temple on Monday after he took a visit to Penn State this past weekend. So again, a former D2 All-American at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP. On3 has him rated as a 4-star transfer portal prospect. He was the only D2 guard in America to average more than 20 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. So a very well-rounded career. And again, this is a trend that you're starting to see. D1 programs looking to the D2 level. And I think it's indicative of the trend where, like, I can't, again, we weren't looking at Dallas Dillard's recruitment at St. Raymond's when he was in the Bronx up in New York, but one of the top D2 players in America. He had a knee injury that forced him to miss, I guess, the second half of 2.5 seasons ago. Obviously played this past season, did not play the season before, but looked healthy, looked really good. And, a guy that, he visited Penn State. He's got USF, Dayton, Duquesne, and UNLV on his list as well. Kyle, what do you think of this development of him coming in, Temple obviously making him a priority? How would he, I guess it's an easy question to say, how would he fit in? They've got plenty of roster spots.
Yeah.
And he's a guard that will come in and play right away.
Yeah, they are definitely in the draft best available portion of their rebuild. Yeah. Like there's no need for a fit. I think he's a guy that, like you said, it's a recent trend. I think like 10 years ago you would have scoffed at like a D2 player making the jump up to Division I basketball, but that's pretty common nowadays. And I think you can tell by the schools recruiting him that like the Temple's not the only one to think that he can make that jump. I do think it's going to come down to Temple and Penn State. As far as just like the type of player, I'm curious if Temple envisions him as like their true full-time point guard. Obviously he ran the offense a bit at IUP. Ball security might be a little bit of an issue, but a lot of that is just because he was asked to do so much in that offense. So I'm curious if he ends up being a guy that's like, okay, here's the ball and here's the program, or is it more of like to a bigger extent, like a Messiah Gilliard, where like you can run the offense, but like we also like playing you off ball and we want you to be a tenacious defender and stuff like that. So I think he would be a very good start to this transfer portal class. I think he's a guy that would come in and start right away. So I'd be very curious if he ends up coming here to start, or if he maybe wants to take a chance at a bigger stage at Penn State, where maybe he's not necessarily starting, but he is playing Big Ten basketball.
Well, we'll keep saying, as we have before, when we get reputable and well-sourced transfer portal stuff, we'll put it on the men's basketball board first, but obviously a player to keep an eye on there. And then the other big piece of news that Kyle broke was that Adam Fisher has filled out his staff with the hire of Courtney Eldridge. Played for Fran McCaffrey at UNC Greensboro, right? And then was on his staff at Iowa, spent the past season at Elon. So, obviously they had a spot to fill when Bill Courtney passed back in January. So he's got good recruiting ties, particularly up in New England. So Kyle, you broke the story. What do you think of the hire?
When the scoop and Al scoop, I think he's a good hire. He has a reputation for people we've talked to as like a very solid recruiter, especially in the New England level region. I think you've seen him when he was at Iowa come into whether it's Boston or Newark, and then kind of just like pluck guys from the East Coast and bring them out to Iowa, which is not the easiest thing in the world. So I think he has connections there for a footprint that Temple wants to continue to recruit. He brings Power 5 experience to this staff, which is invaluable because I think it kind of just shows just how how things are done at a program that was pretty successful in the Big Ten, like Iowa. As a player, he's led a program to the tournament. In his junior year, they won the Southern Conference, and they were 16th seed in the tournament. I think they lost to Stanford. I think it's a good addition. I think filling Bill Courtney's shoes is a lot to ask for one person. That was an incredibly experienced coach that now you're replacing with a younger guy that is going to be asked maybe to do a little more recruiting than Bill was probably asked to do, but I think it's a solid addition, at least on paper.
Kyle, with this hire too, I mean, if we're talking about portal possibilities, if you check out Kyle's article, there's maybe a guy to potentially pay attention to there, right?
Yeah, and apologies if I butcher the name, but Laji Dembele is a guy that was a big at Iowa for 2 years while Courtney Eldridge was there, transfers to UNLV, gets injured a little bit, enters the portal again. That's one of the guys who's kind of like reading the tea leaves. You think, like, okay, there's a fit there. Like, if he went to Iowa because of Courtney Eldridge, from the area, opportunity to play, there might be enough connection there. Other guys that have kind of like entered the portal that have connections to Courtney Eldridge, one that sticks out to mind is Caleb Middleton out of Elon. Didn't have like the most productive year at Elon, but he was a guy that when Eldridge was at Iowa, he offered him, he's like 6'11" from New Hampshire, offered him to Iowa, didn't go to Iowa, went to New Hampshire, then transferred to Elon to follow Eldridge when he gets to that level, enters the portal after this year. Like I said, not the most productive year, 6'11", 215, averaged 3.1 points, 3.4 rebounds for an Elon team that wasn't the greatest team, but that might be a situation where you kind of trust the tape and look, I liked him coming out of high school and go from there, and presumably there's a relationship there. So that's one of the bonuses of bringing a guy in from out of staff. Because look, like I'm sure Demir Cosby-Roundtree wanted to get promoted, or somebody on the off-bench role wanted to get promoted onto the bench, but one of the benefits of bringing somebody from the outside is they have those recruiting connections and the potential like Rolodex of guys they might be able to bring with them.
Stay tuned. As I said, we'll have more portal developments for you. I should note that I wanted to shout out Temple Owls alum 1620, one of our subscribers, had asked the question. He put this on our message board. Great reporting to Kyle. Any reactions to the hire?
Kudos to Kyle.
Kudos to Kyle. So that was in response in part to a mailbag question from Temple Owls alum 1620. So again, he said, great reporting. Any reactions to the hire? Must admit, I don't know much about him. Well, now Temple Owls alum 1620. Now you do. So again, as we get more well-sourced stuff, we'll continue to drop it on the basketball board first, and then continue to talk about it on the podcast as well. But again, this, as you guys know, this roster is far from complete. So we'll have a lot more to talk about in the mailbag and in the future episodes on this men's basketball roster. Promised you last week that we would talk a little bit more about Diane Richardson's women's basketball roster. So if you're keeping track at home, the portal losses are Jaleesa Molina, Savannah Curry, Drew Alexander, Brianna Mead, and Kellyanne Sedano. So Molina and Curry are, really the biggest losses here. And then one of Mead, Alexander, Sedano maybe could have stepped into, a bigger role off the bench like Kayla Turner did. None of them really found the consistency to be able to do that this year. But since we last recorded with you, 2 additions for Diane Richardson out of the portal, and Shayla Smith from Penn State, and then a forward and Timia Grice from Arizona State. A lot of people were chiming in on social media. It looked like Timia Grice is a 6'5" player who can dunk. Now they have 3 seasons of eligibility left. Smith is an intriguing ad. She's the all-time leading high school scorer for any boys or girls basketball player in the city of Philadelphia. She played at Auden Reed Charter High School. The best way I can explain this is people have asked me where Auden Reed is. It's the high school that you see if you are on 76 heading toward the stadiums. It's the charter school that you see off to the left there. So I always think about that because that's near where
Where on 76?
If you're coming down 76 and you come past University City,
yeah,
and you're starting to get a little bit closer
before you get to like that car dealership that's right off of 76.
It's right near there. I always think about that because that's in Grace Ferry. That's near where my dad grew up. So that's where Auden Reed is. So.
I always think to myself, who's buying cars there? Like, how do you roll? Like, it's just like, it seems like an unnatural place for a car dealership.
If they want to advertise on the scoop, maybe they can. So
yeah, I'll drive around. Give me a lease.
But an intriguing ad there because, again, she was a prolific high school scorer at Penn State. She didn't play much. She played a little bit earlier. She played in 20 games, 2.6 points and 2.6 rebounds. Didn't score a point after December 31st. But and then in terms of Grice, 8 games, 9 points and 6 rebounds. But again, she's 6'5" and is bringing some intriguing upside to the front court. So they've held on to their 3 best players in Tristan Taylor, Kayla Turner, and Sanaya Craig. And so that women's portal remains open until April 20th. They've got a lot of spots to fill here. But Kyle, any thoughts on these additions?
I mean, I think with Grice, 6'5" in playing in the American women's basketball has to be a mismatch. I can't remember Temple having that big of an interior presence during my time of paying attention to Temple women's basketball. Victoria McCauley sticks out my time in college, but I think she was like 6'2", 6'3". So if they can develop her, I think that's somebody that you could potentially be a mismatch with almost any Division I women's basketball team. They're in the similar boat where, look, I mean, they've returned some big talent. Like, assuming nothing happens in the next 5 days and Kayla Turner and Tristan Taylor and Sanaya Craig stay, that's arguably their three best players coming back. I think they are still in position to reload and hopefully bounce back from a disappointing year.
Same thing there. We'll have a lot more for you in the coming weeks for both of these rosters. They have multiple spots to fill. So this could be kind of half agonizing, but half fun and intriguing for fans. So again, we get some good scoop. We'll put it on the
I will say this, and if past indication is any indication, or past experience is any indication, I wouldn't expect this to be any scenario where Temple starts rolling out commitments before the portal is closed.
Yeah.
I think everybody is always a little hesitant, even when you get ink on paper, of is that guy, if we publicize this, is that guy actually going to come here? In the past, it went from weeks of people being upset Temple hasn't had anybody, and then they slow rolled out. By the way, we've had like these 6 commitments this whole time.
No, it's a great point, and it's great context for people to understand, because I think programs quite naturally are hesitant to put it out there, because then other programs will have agents poking around like, what's their buyout look like?
Right.
You know, and that's the world that we're living in right now. So a great point to be made there. All right, we're going to hop into the mailbag. Before we do, as we always do, we're going to hear from our friend Mike Greenspan of Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. If you're looking for a good injury lawyer, he's the best guy you could hope to find. But Mike wants to keep you safe in life and on the road so that you don't need his services. So here's Mike's weekly tip, and then we're going to knock out a few mailbag questions for you here to close out this week's episode of The Scoop.
Spring is upon us, and that means heavy rains. And heavy rains mean flooding on the roadways. So here's what not to do when encountering a road and there's water all over it. Do not try to drive through a puddle on the road. You have no idea how deep that puddle could be. It could be an inch or it could be a lot more. And if you try to drive through it and your car gets stuck, then you're stuck. And you're going to be thinking to yourself, why did I do that? So, as inconvenient as it might be, when you're driving in heavy rain and you see that water on the road, detour, go somewhere else. Let's be safe out there.
All right, a few questions to get to here. One that we've already answered. Al Worldwide, the screen name here with the first question. Who is the next assistant coach, and why has it taken so long to fill? It seems counterproductive to not have filled it before the portal opened. Well, now, Al Worldwide, you have the answer to that, and Courtney Aldridge, and they have him hired. And we've also talked to you about how he could particularly be an asset for them in terms of attracting some players from the portal. The other question from Al Worldwide here is, why have they still not replaced Alan Son? But it looks like they have, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going off of directories and stuff, Ben Steenrod, who was the Associate Director of Sports Performance, who looked over the women's lacrosse and women's soccer program, also worked out with football, his title's been updated to Director of Men's Basketball Sports Performance. So wasn't an outside hire or anything like that, but if we're to believe what we see on L Sports with this, then seems like a situation where they just they promoted somebody into that role.
Next question here comes from the screen name TempleFan55. Have you heard of any more portal targets besides the D2 kid? A couple to mention, although I don't really know. Maybe we mentioned Isaiah Pasha in a previous podcast, although it looks like he's visiting Duquesne. I have not seen a reported offer, reported interest from Isaiah Pasha, who Temple had recruited very heavily around the time they were recruiting Aiden Tobias in, but he's in the portal now after deciding to leave Virginia Tech. He might be a possibility, but it looks like he has some other offers and other visits lined up. Kafik Myers, we have heard, I think we actually got this question on our message board, not necessarily a podcast mailbag question, but I think there's some mutual interest there. The point guard who had played at St. Joe's and before that at Newman Goretti. I don't know if he does decide to come to Temple. Does he come in and start right away? I think he might be more of a rotational piece, but a good rotational piece. So potentially a player to keep an eye on there. So I think there's a little bit more smoke at this point with Kafik Myers than there is with Isaiah Pasha, but a couple players to keep an eye on there. Temple Fan 55. All right, one final mailbag question to close us out here. This one from the screen name Temple J. This is football related. Will Temple's offense look more like the Montana State offense run under Tyler Walker? And Kyle, you kind of talked about this, when we were talking more about the Cherry and White game, but I have a feeling that your answer to this question is yes, or at least likely.
I think yes with some caveats. I think unless you are the 1991 49ers, I think most offenses in college football are adapt to their personnel. I think obviously coaches have their own preference and they prefer a quarterback with mobility and they prefer to have just a stable of running backs to roll out there. And I think they have that now, like I said earlier. So I think I don't think they'll be hamstrung by any personnel options. I think it's going to be also still just look, if Jaxon Smolik wins the job and he likes to take more shots downfield or if he trusts his accuracy with that, then we're going to put those wrinkles in more. But yeah, I don't think I'd all of a sudden expect. I think Montana State had 3 people rush for 1,000 yards the last year that Tyler Walker was there. A lot of that being because they played 15 games because they made it all the way to the college football championship, the FCS championship. But yeah, I think they're going to be more like what Tyler Walker expected them to be like.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think they have more personnel there. I think you talked about this before, the running back room, provided everybody stays healthy, that's always the caveat. They could be a lot deeper there. I think Jaxon Smolik has the ability to give them more mobility there. Even if you do bring in a Johnny Shepard for a couple plays here and there, again, he had a rougher day throwing the ball on Saturday, but he can throw the ball better than Tyler Douglas can. So I doubt they would want to burn. Well, they could put Brody Norman in for a couple snaps here and there without burning his red shirt. But
especially if Congress passes this 5 for 5,
yeah,
or NCAA passes this 5 for 5 legislation, doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I would say Temple J that they have a lot more of a chance to look like the Montana State offense that Tyler Walker ran that went to a FCS national championship game. So that's going to do it for this week. Thanks to Clayton Barnes for giving us reporters some access this week. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We'll be back next week. More portal news, anything that comes across on both portal fronts for men's and women's basketball. We're happy to answer more mailbag questions about the football team, and we'll talk to you soon.